Raised by Taoist masters, a girl with mystical powers returns to the family that once rejected her in a past life. Ignored by her parents, she chooses as her guardian a wealthy, paralyzed uncle, cold and emotionally numb. Through rituals and compassion, she begins to heal him physically and emotionally, awakening his desire to protect her. When she's thrown into a cursed lake, he saves her with his own hands, and together, they are reborn as soul-bound father and daughter. The rising sun illuminated the treetops of the Silverwood Mountains as little Helen Northwood, just 10 years old, meditated by the banks of a crystal-clear waterfall. With her eyes closed and hands in a prayer position, her body seemed to pulse in sync with the falling water. At the Temple of the Sacred Waters, hidden among the mountains of Colorado, she had grown up under the care of Mother Iris and Father Sebastian, priests of an ancient American cult that blended indigenous, African and Eastern knowledge. Helen, concentrate your energy in the center of your chest. Let it flow like water that never stops, instructed Mother Iris, a dark-skinned, gray-haired woman whose eyes seemed to see beyond the material world. The girl took a deep breath, and to the astonishment of 3 young apprentices watching from a distance, small whirlpools formed on the surface of the water around her. Helen opened her eyes, revealing a golden glow that soon dissipated. Mother Iris, I had another dream about the big house last night, Helen said, rising with unusual grace for her age. I saw the man in the wheelchair again. He was crying alone in the dark. The priestess nodded, her face marked by wrinkles of concern. Your destiny approaches, little one. The ancestral spirits do not stop whispering your true name. Inside the temple, built with centuries-old stones and hardwood, Father Sebastian organized medicinal herbs while listening attentively to the conversation. Helen will turn 11 tomorrow, commented the white-bearded man. It's time for us to reveal the whole truth, as we promised the invisible guardians. That night, as the full moon bathed the temple with silver light, Helen was called to the sacred chamber, a circular hall decorated with ancient symbols and quartz crystals. The priests lit 7 colored candles and formed a circle around the girl. Helen, the time has come for you to know your true story, Mother Iris said, holding the girl's hands. Your birth name is Beatrice Cross Ashworth, heiress to one of the most powerful and influential families in New York City. You did not come to us by chance. The girl's eyes widened, but she didn't show complete surprise. In her heart, she had always known there was a greater purpose for the extraordinary gifts she had manifested since infancy. Father Sebastian continued the revelation. You were brought to us by an old servant of the Ashworth family, who received instructions from the spirits to protect you. Your life was in danger from birth, due to ancient family disputes and a prophecy that said you would restore the balance broken generations ago. And my biological parents? Helen asked, feeling a lump in her throat. Henry and Eliza Ashworth, Mother Iris replied with sorrow. People of great influence, but with hearts hardened by ambition. They believed you had died as a baby, a lie told to preserve your life. The priestess then brought a small wooden box carved with symbols of protection. Opening it, she revealed a golden locket with the Ashworth family crest, a falcon over mountains. This amulet was with you when you arrived. It contains the ancestral energy of your lineage. Helen took the locket in her hands and was immediately flooded with memories that did not belong to her current life. Images of an imposing mansion in Lake Placid, New York, unknown faces that somehow seemed familiar, and an overwhelming sense of rejection and pain. Tears streamed down her serene face. I'm seeing another life. It's me, but it's not me. I'm locked in a dark room, begging to get out, she whispered, trembling. They didn't believe me. They said I was cursed. Father Sebastian knelt beside the girl and explained, You possess the gift of ancestral memory. In your past life, you were also an Ashworth, but you were cruelly rejected by your family when you demonstrated your spiritual gifts. You departed from this world without knowing true family love. Helen took a deep breath, absorbing the painful revelation. After a few moments of silence, she raised her face with surprising determination. I need to go back, don't I? To correct the mistakes of the past, Mother Iris nodded. That is your choice, little one. You were reborn with a purpose, to restore the spiritual balance of your lineage and find your true place. But know that the path will not be easy. Those who caused your misfortune in your past life still walk among the living. In the following days, Helen intensified her spiritual training. She learned to manipulate the vital energy of plants, to read the signs of destiny in crystal-clear waters, to prepare healing potions with ingredients from the American flora, and to communicate with the spirits of nature that inhabited the mountains. One afternoon, while practicing the art of scrying in a water mirror, Helen saw the image of a man in a wheelchair, with a severe expression and eyes devoid of emotion. Despite his cold demeanor, something about him deeply touched her heart. "Who is this man, Mother Iris?" she asked, pointing to the reflection in the water. The priestess observed the image carefully. "This is Richard Ashworth, your uncle, a man who was once full of life, but who now lives in isolation after a mysterious accident that left him paralyzed from the legs down. They say his heart has become as cold as the winter waters of Lake Placid, New York." Helen felt an inexplicable connection with that embittered man. At that moment, she knew that her destiny was intertwined with his in a way she did not yet fully understand. As her 11th birthday approached, Helen began to dream every night about the Ashworth mansion. She saw herself walking through luxurious corridors, facing scornful glances, but moving determinedly towards a greater goal. On the eve of her departure, Father Sebastian gave the girl a set of protective talismans and a small vial containing a golden liquid. "This is the elixir of the 7 sacred herbs, prepared with prayers and the light of the full moon. Use it wisely only when the moment is crucial." Mother Iris added, "Remember everything you learned here, little Beatrice. Your pure heart is your greatest strength. Do not allow hatred or the desire for revenge to corrupt your soul." On the morning of her departure, dressed in simple but dignified clothes, Helen, now ready to reassume her identity as Beatrice, bid farewell to the only home she had ever known. With a small suitcase containing her most precious belongings, including the talismans and elixirs, she embarked on a journey towards her past and future. "Do not be afraid," Mother Iris said, embracing her one last time. "The guiding spirits will always be by your side. And remember, your mission is not just to reclaim your place in the family, but to bring light to those hardened hearts." As the bus wound its way along the curving road of the Silverwood Mountains towards Lake Placid, New York, Beatrice looked out the window, observing the clouds dancing among the mountain peaks. In her chest, the Ashworth locket pulsed like a second heart, connecting her to her inescapable destiny. "I'm going home," she whispered to herself, not as the girl they rejected, but as the light that will transform the shadows. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching from. Continuing. The imposing Ashworth mansion stood majestically atop a hill in Lake Placid, New York, surrounded by centuries-old araucaria trees and meticulously manicured gardens. Its wrought-iron gates, adorned with the family crest, a falcon over mountains, intimidated any ordinary visitor. But Beatrice, clutching her locket firmly, felt strangely at home as she walked along the stone road leading to the main entrance. The butler Gerald, a middle-aged man with impeccable posture, watched with suspicion the 11-year-old girl who presented herself alone at the mansion gates. "State your name and the reason for your visit," he demanded with protocolar coldness. "I am Beatrice Cross Ashworth," the girl replied with a serenity that disconcerted the employee. "I came to see my grandfather, Mr. Augustus Ashworth." The butler frowned. "Impossible. Miss Beatrice passed away many years ago." With a calm smile, she showed him the locket. "I think my grandfather will recognize this." The object shimmered under the winter sun, making the butler blanch. Without further questioning, he led the girl through the gardens to the mansion's entrance, where the interior revealed an opulence that contrasted with the simplicity of the Temple of the Waters. In the library, a white-haired man with a severe gaze analyzed documents behind a solid wood desk. Augustus Ashworth, patriarch of the family and president of the business conglomerate that bore his surname, looked up as the door opened. "Sir, forgive the interruption," the butler said, visibly nervous. "This girl claims to be Beatrice." The patriarch stood up abruptly, knocking over his golden pen. His eyes swept over the small figure before him, pausing on the locket she proudly displayed. "Leave us alone." "Gerald," he ordered with a trembling voice. When they were alone, the old businessman circled the table with slow steps. as if he feared the girl's image might dissipate at any moment. "It's impossible," he murmured. "My granddaughter Beatrice departed from this world as a baby." "I didn't depart, Grandpa," she replied sweetly. "I was taken to protect myself. And now I have returned to restore the balance of our family." Something in the girl's eyes, a glimmer of ancient wisdom, made the patriarch recoil slightly. He pressed a button under the table, and within minutes the library was invaded by Henry and Eliza Ashworth, Beatrice's biological parents, accompanied by other family members. Eliza, an elegant woman in her 40s, stifled a gasp upon seeing the girl. Henry, a stern-faced executive, clenched his fists. "What kind of trick is this, Father?" he questioned, addressing the patriarch. "Who is this child?" "I am your daughter, Beatrice," the girl replied before her grandfather could speak. Her voice was calm, but it carried an authority that belied her age. "I know you thought I had departed, but I am here to reclaim my place in this family." Eliza let out a nervous laugh. "This is absurd. Our daughter died years ago. This must be some imposter, trained to take advantage of our family." "Perhaps a simple test will resolve the matter," Beatrice suggested, taking a small vial from her bag. "I have here water from the sacred spring. If I am truly an Ashworth, the liquid will remain crystal clear upon touching my skin. If I am an imposter, it will become cloudy." The demonstration was a simple trick Mother Iris had taught her. There was no magic in the water itself, but in how a person's energy reacted to it. Beatrice poured a few drops onto her palm, and the liquid began to glow with a bluish hue, to the astonishment of everyone present. "This is some kind of trick," exclaimed Henry, but his voice no longer held the same conviction. Patriarch Augustus, however, approached the girl and took the locket in his trembling hands. "This belonged to my late wife. It was placed in Beatrice's cradle on the night she disappeared." A heavy silence fell over the room. Augustus gazed intensely into his granddaughter's eyes, as if searching for some sign of falsehood. Instead, he found only a deep and ancient understanding. "How can you prove you are truly Beatrice?" he finally asked. The girl smiled serenely. "In your bedroom, Grandpa, there's a wall clock that plays a specific melody at midnight. It was Grandma Cecilia's favorite song. And in the secret drawer of your desk, you keep the letters she wrote to you during her trip to Paris in 1975. The patriarch's face paled. No one but him knew of the existence of that secret drawer. "How do you know that?" he asked, his voice choked. "Because the memories of our lineage run in my blood," Beatrice replied. "I can see beyond the veil that separates past and present. I know things that only ancestral spirits could reveal." At that moment, other family members began to gather in the library, drawn by the commotion. Aunts, uncles, and cousins observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "This is ridiculous," exclaimed Clara Ashworth, Henry's sister and mother of two arrogant teenagers. "This girl is clearly a charlatan." "If she really is who she says she is," Clara's husband Albert added, "she must be cursed. How could she have survived all these years?" Beatrice observed each reaction with serenity, recognizing in the hostile glances the same negative energies that had tried to destroy her in her previous life. But now she was prepared, strengthened by the teachings of the Temple of the Waters. The patriarch raised his hand, silencing the murmurs. "There is a way to confirm. In the family vault, we keep a lock of baby Beatrice's hair. Our DNA test will resolve this matter." The girl nodded, confident. She knew that science would confirm what her heart already knew. In the following weeks, while awaiting the results, Beatrice was accommodated in a guest room in the mansion. Despite the apparent kindness, she perceived that she was constantly watched, and that doors were locked as she passed. The memories of her past life became more vivid with each passing day in that environment, which was both familiar and hostile. One rainy afternoon, while exploring the less frequented corridors of the mansion, Beatrice found a half-open door. Inside, she saw a man in a wheelchair, contemplating the misty landscape through a panoramic window. It was Richard Ashworth, the uncle she had seen in her visions. "Excuse me for disturbing you," she said, making the man abruptly turn his chair. Richard was just over 40, but the lines on his face reflected a suffering that aged him. His eyes, however, still held an intense though melancholic sparkle. "So you're the supposed resurrected niece," he commented coldly. "Did you come to spy on the family cripple?" Beatrice was not intimidated by the hostility. Instead, she calmly approached and sat on a small stool near the wheelchair. "I came to meet you, Uncle Richard. In my dreams, you always appear." He raised an eyebrow somewhere between curious and skeptical. "Dreams? What kind of game are you playing, girl?" "No game. Just the truth." She smiled with genuine compassion. "I know you suffer constant pain since the accident. Not just in your body, but also in your heart." Richard's face hardened. "Who told you about my pains?" "No one needed to tell me. I can feel the blocked energies in your body. There's a knot here," she pointed to his lower back without touching him. "And another here," she indicated his solar plexus. Richard pushed his chair away with an abrupt movement. "I don't need childish charlatanism. If you came seeking the Ashworth fortune, know that we are used to more sophisticated swindlers." Beatrice was not shaken by the rejection. Instead, she left a small sachet of herbs on the nearby table. "It's a tea to relieve nighttime pains," she explained. 3 leaves in hot water before bed. "You don't have to believe me now, Uncle Richard." "Time will give us that chance." As she was already at the door, Richard's voice stopped her. "Why did you come back? If you are truly Beatrice, why return to a family that it seems never wanted you?" The girl turned with a serene smile. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, including you." 2 days later, the DNA test result arrived, confirming the unthinkable. The girl was, without a shadow of a doubt, Beatrice Cross Ashworth, the disappeared granddaughter. The news dropped like a bomb among the family members. Henry and Eliza, pressured by the patriarch, were forced to publicly acknowledge the daughter they had believed lost. In a formal meeting in the main living room, with the entire family present, Augustus made the official announcement. "Beatrice is truly my granddaughter and legitimate heir of the Ashworth family. As such, she is entitled to proper protection and education." Henry stepped forward, his face a mask of false emotion. "We are thrilled by the return of our daughter. Naturally, she will come to live with us and—" "No," Beatrice interrupted firmly. "I appreciate the offer, Father, but I prefer to choose my own guardian within the family." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Augustus frowned, but something in his granddaughter's determined gaze prevented him from objecting. "And who would you choose?" asked the patriarch. Without hesitation, Beatrice pointed to the solitary figure in the corner of the room, who was observing everything with skeptical detachment. "I choose my Uncle Richard as my guardian." A stunned silence dominated the room, followed by exclamations of disbelief. Richard, more surprised than anyone, dropped the glass he was holding, shattering it on the marble floor. "This is absurd." Richard's voice echoed through the Ashworth living room, cutting through the silence that had followed Beatrice's announcement. "I have neither the ability nor the interest to be anyone's guardian, much less a child's." Patriarch Augustus watched the scene with calculating curiosity, as if evaluating an unexpected move in a chess game. Henry and Eliza, Beatrice's parents, exchanged glances that mixed relief and concern. "The girl is obviously not in her right mind," argued Clara, Beatrice's eldest aunt. "How could she choose Richard? He lives practically reclusive in that wing of the mansion. He wouldn't even know how to take care of a child." "Precisely because of that," Beatrice replied with a calm that disconcerted the adults around her. "Uncle Richard is the person in this family who most needs healing." Richard maneuvered his wheelchair to face his niece. His eyes, usually cold and distant, now sparked with indignation. "I am not a charity project, girl. I don't need your healing or your pity. Choose someone else." Beatrice held his gaze without flinching. "It's not pity, Uncle Richard. It's destiny." Patriarch Augustus rose from his armchair, leaning on his carved cane. Over 70 years old, he still maintained the imposing demeanor that had made him legendary in the business world. "Beatrice's decision will be respected," he decreed, with incontestable authority. "Richard, you are the most intellectually capable among my children. Before your accident, you were the most brilliant executive in our companies. Consider this an opportunity to return to the family circle." Richard opened his mouth to protest, but the patriarch raised his hand, silencing him. "It is my final decision. The girl will remain under your guardianship, with all the necessary resources for her education and well-being. Naturally, she will continue to live here in the main mansion, where she can receive guidance from the entire family. In the following weeks, Life in the Ashworth mansion reorganized around Beatrice's unexpected presence. Against all expectations, the girl showed no intention of seeking revenge for her abandonment or demanding privileges. On the contrary, she was solicitous and observant, as if she were there to learn as much as to teach. The relationship with Richard, however, remained tense and distant. The businessman kept himself locked in his office most of the time, delegating to a personal assistant, Jonas, the task of supervising his niece's basic needs. When forced to interact with Beatrice during family meals, he limited himself to monosyllabic answers and impatient glances. One stormy afternoon, as lightning cut across the sky of Lake Placid, New York, Beatrice found Richard in his private library. He was examining old financial reports, as if searching in them for some answer to long-forgotten questions. "Can I help you organize these documents, Uncle?" she offered, entering without asking permission. Richard looked up, annoyed by the intrusion. Children shouldn't wander around the mansion unsupervised. "Where is Jonas?" "He went out to get your medication from the pharmacy." She calmly approached the desk. "You didn't drink the tea I gave you, did you? Your pains worsened with the change in weather." The businessman frowned. "How do you know that?" "Your energy is more turbulent today. I see shadows around your spine." Richard abruptly closed the folder he was examining. "I don't believe in such mystical nonsense. If you truly want to become an Ashworth, you need to learn to think with logic and reason, not with healers' superstitions." Instead of being offended, Beatrice smiled. "You weren't always like this, Uncle Richard. Before the accident, you believed in intuition. That's what made you a brilliant businessman, not just logic." The mention of before made Richard's face harden. "Who told you about my past?" "No one needed to tell me." Beatrice approached the window, watching the rain lash against the gardens. "I saw it in the waterfall's waters in the temple. I saw you walking through forests, studying medicinal plants in the Amazon, talking with indigenous shamans. I saw your passion for traditional knowledge that could revolutionize the family's pharmaceutical industry." Richard paled. His expeditions to the Amazon were a closely guarded secret, predating the accident that left him paraplegic. Only Patriarch Augustus knew the details of that personal project, abandoned when he lost the mobility in his legs. "You've been rummaging through my personal files," he accused, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. "I didn't need to." She turned to face him. "Just as I didn't need to read medical records to know that your accident was not a common accident. It was caused by negative energies, intentionally directed." A lightning flash illuminated Beatrice's face, giving her an almost supernatural aura. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you implying that I was the victim of some kind of spell?" he asked between skepticism and curiosity. "It's not an insinuation, it's a fact. Doctors never found a plausible explanation for the sudden brake failure of your car that night, did they? Nor for the fact that, despite the violence of the accident, you only suffered specific spinal injuries, as if something had deliberately selected the damage." Richard gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Those were doubts that haunted him during sleepless nights, conspiracy theories he had never shared with anyone. "How can you know all this?" Beatrice approached him with light steps. "I can show you if you allow me." Before Richard could protest, she delicately placed her small hands a few inches above his shoulders without touching him. She closed her eyes in concentration. "What are you doing?" Richard's question died on his lips as an unexpected warmth began to spread through his chest, flowing down his spine to his insensitive legs. "I'm just channeling vital energy to the blocked points," Beatrice explained, still with her eyes closed. "I cannot cure the physical injury, but I can help alleviate the pain and restore part of the energy flow." For a few moments, Richard allowed himself to relax under that strangely comforting sensation. Then, as if waking from a trance, he abruptly pushed his chair away. "Enough of this nonsense. I am a man of science, not a patient for healers." Beatrice retreated respectfully. "The science you value so much is beginning to recognize what the ancients always knew. The mind and spirit affect the physical body. You felt the relief, you cannot deny it." Richard did not reply, but his demeanor was less tense. The searing pain that used to torment him on rainy days had considerably diminished. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. "What do you gain by helping someone who doesn't even believe in your abilities?" I am not seeking personal gain, Uncle Richard. I am here to restore the balance broken generations ago in this family. And you are a fundamental piece in that process. The businessman laughed bitterly. A broken piece, you mean? No, an essential piece. Beatrice walked to the bookshelf and took out an old, worn-covered volume. This diary you wrote during your expeditions in the Amazon contains the true purpose of the Ashworth family. The mission that was corrupted by greed. Richard's eyes widened. How did you find that? I kept it locked in the vault. It called to me, she simply replied, just as you called to me through the waters of the temple. That night, against all his rational convictions, Richard leafed through the forgotten diary. In it, he had recorded his discoveries about medicinal plants known only to isolated tribes, and his vision of creating an ethical pharmaceutical industry that respected traditional knowledge and shared profits with indigenous communities. A project that had been ridiculed by his siblings and abandoned when he lost mobility in his legs. The next morning, to the surprise of all the staff, Richard appeared at breakfast at the time Beatrice usually had her morning meal, something he had never done before. Without much ceremony, he asked the girl to tell him more about the Temple of the Waters where she had grown up. Henry and Eliza observed the growing closeness between uncle and niece with evident discomfort. During a business lunch with other family members, Henry did not hide his irritation. Old Richard is softening, he commented to his brother-in-law Albert. Letting himself be fooled by cheap tricks from a manipulative child. The girl is clever, that's undeniable, replied Albert, Clara's husband. She knew exactly where to strike. Richard's intellectual vanity, his obsession with that failed Amazonian project. Clara intervened, lowering her voice. We need to do something before she gains more influence over Richard. If he gets involved in the family business again through her influence, our projects could be compromised. Not to mention he might find out about that matter, Eliza murmured, glancing nervously at her husband. A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone there knew what she was referring to. Richard's accident had not been merely a stroke of bad luck. The girl knows, Albert stated, surprising everyone. I've been monitoring her conversations with Richard through the security system. She showed him some kind of vision about the accident. She explicitly mentioned a curse and luck transfer. Eliza paled. How is that possible? No one knew about this besides us. This girl isn't normal, Clara replied with wide eyes. The servants say she talks to the birds in the garden, that she can predict storms, and that she heals pains with the laying on of hands. Superstitions of ignorant staff, Henry scoffed, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. What matters is that we need to act fast. I propose we hire specialists to unmask this farce. The next morning, the mansion received a visit from 3 distinct figures, a renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Maurice Wells, an investigative journalist, Patricia Green, and a self-proclaimed spiritual fraud unmasker, Professor Arthur Stone. The 3 were introduced during breakfast as guests interested in Beatrice's extraordinary story. The girl received them with a serene smile, as if she had already expected that visit. Richard, by her side, maintained a suspicious expression. We will be honored to answer the questions of the distinguished guests, Beatrice said politely, but I ask that the interviews be conducted in the presence of my legal guardian, Uncle Richard. The day unfolded with a series of tests and questions. Dr. Maurice evaluated Beatrice's mental sanity with tricky questions and psychological tests. The journalist meticulously investigated her story, searching for inconsistencies in the account of the Temple of the Waters. Professor Arthur challenged her to demonstrate her supposed powers under controlled conditions. To the frustration of the investigators and the conspiring family, Beatrice remained impeccably coherent and calm. When Professor Arthur demanded a demonstration of her abilities, she simply smiled. My gifts are not stage tricks, Professor. I cannot command them like flipping a switch. They flow naturally when needed. Typical charlatan's answer, exclaimed the man, turning triumphantly to Henry and Eliza. Beatrice continued smiling. However, I can tell you that you suffer from chronic migraines due to a childhood accident, that your wife left you 3 months ago taking your pet dog, and that the check you received from my family to be here today will help you pay the overdue mortgage on your house. Professor Arthur's face paled. No one in the room, except himself, could have known those personal details. That night after dinner, Richard and Beatrice were talking privately in the library when the door opened, revealing Patriarch Augustus leaning on his cane. "It seems you passed the test today, little one," commented the old man, sitting heavily in an armchair. "Our specialists are leaving the property quite disconcerted." "There was no need to subject her to this circus, Father," Richard protested. "Beatrice has already proven who she is with the DNA test." Augustus made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "It wasn't my idea, it was your siblings. I merely allowed it, to give them enough rope to hang themselves with their own distrust." He turned to Beatrice. "What intrigues me is how you know so much about matters you should be unaware of." The girl tilted her head slightly. "Are you referring to Uncle Richard's accident, or to the confidential documents you showed me yesterday?" A glimmer of admiration passed through the patriarch's tired eyes. "Both. You are truly extraordinary, child. It's not just me, Grandpa. We all have extraordinary abilities. Most have simply disconnected from that perception due to materialism and ambition." Augustus let out a short laugh. "Deep philosophy for someone so young." He stood up with difficulty. "I would like to see this Temple of the Waters where you were raised. Perhaps we can organize a visit." Beatrice's eyes sparkled. "That would be wonderful. Mother Iris and Father Sebastian would be honored to receive you." After the patriarch's departure, Richard observed his niece with curiosity. "Do you really believe my father, the great capitalist Augustus Ashworth, is interested in visiting a spiritual temple in the middle of the mountains?" Beatrice smiled enigmatically. "Grandpa is searching for answers to questions he doesn't even know how to formulate. Age has made him question the legacy he built." The next morning, the mansion was surprised by alarming news. The patriarch had suffered a sudden illness during the night. The family doctor diagnosed a mild case of poisoning, possibly food-related. Although out of danger, Augustus was debilitated and would need absolute rest. Henry immediately called an emergency family meeting, purposefully excluding Richard and Beatrice. When they were finally informed hours later, the decisions had already been made. Henry would temporarily assume control of the companies, and the trip to the Temple of the Waters was cancelled for security reasons. "It's very convenient, don't you think?" Richard commented to Beatrice, as they observed from a distance the intense movement of executives entering and leaving the main office. "My father falls ill precisely when he shows interest in learning about your origins." "It was no coincidence," the girl confirmed with a serious expression. "I felt a negative energy in the tea served to Grandpa last night. I tried to warn him telepathically, but the blockage was too strong." Richard stared at her with a mixture of skepticism and concern. "Are you suggesting someone tried to poison my father?" "Not fatally," Beatrice clarified. "Just enough to weaken him and allow Henry to assume temporary control. They fear Grandpa is changing his opinions about the future of the family business." In the following days, the tension in the mansion became palpable. While Augustus slowly recovered in his chambers, with access strictly controlled by nurses hired by Henry, the atmosphere of conspiracy intensified. Richard and Beatrice were increasingly isolated from family decisions, treated almost as intruders. One afternoon, while Beatrice meditated in the garden, Clara approached with false cordiality, accompanied by her 2 teenage children, Thomas and Marcella. "Dear niece, we came to invite you for a special outing," she announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's a wonderful lake near the property, a historic family place you should see." Beatrice immediately perceived the negative vibrations emanating from the trio, but maintained her serenity. Her visions the night before had shown dark waters and imminent danger, but also a crucial opportunity to advance her mission. "It will be a pleasure to accompany you, Aunt Clara," she replied politely. "Will Uncle Richard come with us?" "Oh, it wouldn't be practical with his condition," Clara replied, exchanging a quick glance with her children. "The paths are too rough for wheelchairs. It will just be a quick outing. We'll be back before dinner." When Richard learned of the outing hours later through his assistant Jonas, his face contorted in alarm. "Where exactly did they take her?" he asked with urgency in his voice. "To the Lake of the Black Stones, sir," Jonas replied. "Mrs. Clara said she wanted to show the girl the family's historic site." Richard paled. "That place has nothing historic about it. It's an isolated swamp my great-grandfather used for strange rituals. The property doesn't even officially belong to the family." He maneuvered his chair to the phone, frantically dialing Clara's cell. No answer. Then he tried Thomas's. Nothing. "Jonas, prepare the adapted jeep," he ordered with determination, "and call the security guard Anthony to accompany us. We need to go to the Lake of the Black Stones immediately." Meanwhile, miles away, Beatrice walked along a muddy trail, following Clara and her cousins. The sky quickly darkened with storm clouds, and the air carried an odor of decaying vegetation. The closer they got to the supposed lake, the more the girl felt the negative energies intensify. "It's just there," Clara indicated, pointing to a clearing ahead. "The Lake of the Black Stones has waters with special properties. They say our ancestors performed purification rituals there." Beatrice nodded silently. Through her heightened perception, she could feel that this place was exactly the opposite, a concentration point of dense and destructive energies, possibly used for rituals of a dark nature. When they finally reached the lake's edge, Beatrice observed the dark, still waters surrounded by black, twisted stones. There was no beauty there, only desolation. "What do you think of the surprise?" asked a masculine voice behind them. Albert, Clara's husband, emerged from behind a tree, accompanied by a rude-looking man dressed in dark clothes and carrying a leather bag. "Who is this man?" Beatrice questioned, although she already knew the answer through her visions. "This is Master Jerome," Albert introduced with a sinister smile. "A specialist in spiritual phenomena. He will help us determine if you truly possess special gifts as you claim." The man stepped forward, analyzing Beatrice with calculating eyes. "So this is the miracle girl? Let's see what you can really do, girl." Beatrice remained calm, although she felt the growing danger. "I am not here to prove anything, sir. And this place is not suitable for any kind of positive spiritual demonstration." Clara laughed nervously. "Don't be shy now, dear. You impressed Grandpa Augustus and Uncle Richard so much. Don't you want to show us your gifts too?" "Enough pretense," Albert interrupted abruptly. "Jerome, do what we agreed upon." The man took several objects from his bag, dried herbs, a rusty dagger, a vial containing a dark liquid. He began to arrange them in a circular pattern on the lake's edge. "What are you doing?" Beatrice asked, stepping back. "A simple test," Jerome replied in a monotone voice. "If you truly possess the gifts you claim, you will know exactly what I am preparing and how to defend yourself." Clara signaled to her children, who quickly positioned themselves behind Beatrice, blocking a possible escape. "You don't need to do this," the girl said in a serene voice despite the alarming situation. "I know why you brought me here. You want to keep me away from Uncle Richard and Grandpa Augustus, because you fear I will reveal the truth about the curses you cast." Albert's face contorted in fury. "You're nothing but a manipulative little girl. You came from who knows where to try and take what is rightfully ours." "I don't want to take anything from you," Beatrice replied. "I just want to restore the balance that was broken by greed and fear." "Enough talk," interrupted Jerome, who had completed his ritual circle. "Approach, girl. It's time to see who is stronger, your spiritual protectors or the ancestral guardians of this lake." At that moment, heavy raindrops began to fall, announcing the imminent storm. Lightning cut across the darkened sky, momentarily illuminating the sinister scene. "Last chance," Albert warned. "Come voluntarily for the purification ritual, or we will have to force you." Beatrice looked at the stormy sky, then at the dark waters of the lake, and finally at the tense faces around her. For an instant she seemed resigned. Then unexpectedly she smiled. "You really didn't understand anything, did you? You didn't bring me here. I brought you." Before they could react to the enigmatic declaration, an engine noise broke the forest's silence. Headlights cut through the growing darkness, and an adapted jeep emerged on the trail, skidding in the mud before coming to an abrupt halt. "Beatrice!" Richard's desperate voice echoed through the clearing. The adapted jeep had stopped a few meters from the lake's edge, its headlights illuminating the scene like spotlights on a macabre stage. Richard Ashworth was in front of the vehicle, his face contorted in a mixture of fury and despair. "Get away from her!" he shouted, trying to maneuver his wheelchair out of the jeep while Anthony, the security guard, ran towards the group. Clara and Albert exchanged alarmed glances. They hadn't expected to be discovered so quickly. Thomas and Marcella recoiled, frightened by the sudden intervention. "Richard, you don't understand," Clara tried to explain, taking a defensive stance. "We were just—" "Silence!" Richard interrupted, with an authority he hadn't shown in years. "I know exactly what you were trying to do. This place is not a historic family site. It's a point of negative energy that our great-grandfather used for dark rituals." The rain was now falling intensely, turning the ground into slippery mud. Lightning intermittently illuminated the scene, giving the situation an even more tense atmosphere. Jerome, the supposed spiritual master, quickly gathered his tools, visibly annoyed by the interruption. "This doesn't concern me," he murmured, trying to discreetly move away. "Stay where you are," Richard ordered, while Anthony, the security guard, blocked the man's escape. "I want to know exactly what you intended to do with my niece." Albert, realizing the situation was getting out of control, decided to go on the attack. "Your niece? You barely know her, Richard. This girl appeared out of nowhere with fantastic stories, and in a few weeks she already has you and old Augustus wrapped around her finger. Don't you realize you're being manipulated?" Richard ignored the provocation, focusing on Beatrice, who remained strangely calm in the center of the confusion. "Are you all right?" The girl nodded with a serene smile. "I knew you would come, Uncle Richard. I saw it in the waterfall's waters even before I left the temple." Clara let out a nervous laugh. "Are you hearing this? She's still putting on this mystic show even now." A particularly strong thunder shook the air, followed by a lightning flash that illuminated the entire lake. For an instant, everyone could clearly see the distorted reflection on the water's surface. Not their own faces, but shadowy figures, contorted in expressions of suffering. "What was that?" whispered Marcella, clutching her brother's arm. "The souls imprisoned in the lake," Beatrice explained in a grave voice, "victims of rituals like the one they intended to perform on me. This place is a negative portal, fed by centuries of corrupt practices." Jerome, who until then had been trying to maintain his composure, visibly paled. "You truly see beyond the veil," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. Richard tried to get closer, but his chair sank into the mud. Frustrated, he shouted to the security guard, "Anthony, bring Beatrice over here." The man stepped forward, but Albert quickly blocked his way, pushing him forcefully. "This is a family matter, employee. Don't interfere." The confusion that followed happened in seconds. Anthony and Albert began to fight, slipping in the mud. Clara screamed for her children to help their father. Jerome took advantage of the distraction to try and escape. And in the midst of the chaos, Beatrice was pushed, and deliberately or not, no one could say for sure, and fell into the dark waters of the lake. Beatrice. Richard's desperate cry echoed through the clearing. Without a second thought, the businessman did the unthinkable. He released the brakes of his wheelchair and, using all the strength in his arms, propelled himself out of the vehicle. He fell heavily into the mud, but that didn't stop him. Ignoring the searing pain that shot through his spine, he began to drag himself towards the lake. "Richard, stop! You'll drown too," Clara shouted, genuinely alarmed by her brother's action. But Richard no longer heard anything but the desperate pounding of his own heart. Every inch gained towards the lake was a battle against his paralyzed body, against the mud clinging to his clothes, against the rain lashing his face. The businessman, who for years had lived isolated in bitterness and self-pity, now dragged himself with fierce determination, ignoring pain and limitations. Anthony, finally breaking free from Albert, ran to help, but Richard shouted, "No! Look for her on the other side. She might have swum there." When he finally reached the edge of the lake, Richard did not hesitate. Using the extraordinary strength of his arms, the result of years of relying on his wheelchair, he plunged into the dark waters. The icy temperature almost paralyzed his muscles, but adrenaline kept him moving. "Beatrice," he called between gulps of water. "Where are you?" The lake waters seemed alive, pulling him to the bottom with a supernatural force. Lightning cut across the sky, momentarily illuminating the surface. It was during one of these flashes that Richard glimpsed a small hand emerging a few meters away. With desperate strokes, he advanced in the indicated direction. When he finally reached the spot, he dove, fumbling in the aquatic darkness. His fingers touched fabric, then an arm. Grabbing on firmly, he pulled with all the strength he had left. Beatrice emerged, pale and seemingly unconscious. Richard held her above water with one arm, while trying to swim back to the shore with the other. It was an almost impossible struggle for someone with paralyzed legs, but the businessman's determination defied all odds. "Hold on tight, little one," he whispered, swallowing water as he struggled. "I won't let you go." On the shore, everyone watched the unbelievable scene. Even Clara and Albert seemed astonished by Richard's act of bravery, who for years had been seen as the weak, broken, bitter brother. Anthony finally entered the water to help, swimming to Richard and assisting him in bringing Beatrice to shore. When they finally reached dry land, the businessman was exhausted, soaked and trembling, but his arms still protectively enveloped his niece's body. "Is she breathing?" he asked in a hoarse voice. Anthony checked the girl's vital signs. "Yes, sir. Pulse weak but stable." Richard let out a sob of relief, partially collapsing onto the mud. It was then that Beatrice opened her eyes, revealing golden irises that pulsed with their own light. "Uncle Richard," she whispered, her voice strangely amplified despite her weakness. "You dove in for me." The businessman nodded, unable to speak due to exhaustion. Tears mingled with rainwater on his face. "It was a test," Beatrice continued, extending a trembling hand to touch her uncle's face. "Not mine, but yours. What is she talking about?" asked Clara, who had approached cautiously. Beatrice slowly sat up with Anthony's help. Despite her soaked clothes and fragile appearance, an aura of power emanated from her. "The waters of this lake are indeed special, Aunt Clara, but not in the way you thought. They reflect the true nature of those who dive into them. For decades they were used for dark rituals, yes, but their original essence is one of revelation, not destruction." She looked at Richard with a radiant smile. Uncle Richard faced his greatest fear, physical impotence, and proved to be stronger than any curse. He threw himself into the lake without thinking of himself, only to save another life. This act of pure love began to break the chains of the curse cast upon him. As if to confirm her words, Richard felt a strange tingling in his legs, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't movement yet, but the promise that something was changing in his paralyzed body. "Impossible," Albert murmured. "This is some kind of trick." Jerome, who had been observing everything from a distance, slowly approached. His demeanor had changed, now showing respect and even a certain awe. "It's no trick," the man affirmed. "I was hired to neutralize this girl's powers, but I see now that we are facing something that goes beyond common knowledge. She is an ancient soul, reborn with purpose." Clara shook her head, refusing to accept. "This is madness. Richard, don't believe this mystical nonsense. Let's take her back to the mansion and—" "Enough, Clara," Richard interrupted, his voice exhausted but firm. "What you did today was unforgivable. You tried to use dark rituals against an innocent child." "Innocent?" Albert retorted. "This girl is manipulating you and old Augustus to take control of the family fortune." Beatrice, who had stood up with Anthony's help, addressed Albert with a serene expression. "I never wanted your fortune, Uncle Albert. I returned to restore the broken balance, to heal the wounds opened by generations of greed and fear, including yours." She extended her hand, offering it to the man in a gesture of peace. Albert recoiled, suspicious. "We don't have to listen to this," he murmured to Clara. "Let's get out of here." Without waiting for a reply, the couple called their children and began to walk away towards the path they had come from. Jerome hesitated, looking from Beatrice to the retreating group. "You too can choose a different path," the girl said to the man. "Your knowledge can be used to heal, not to harm." The man lowered his head, visibly conflicted, but ended up following Clara and Albert without replying. Anthony helped Richard return to the jeep, improvising a way to carry him in his arms like a firefighter. The businessman was exhausted, soaked and trembling, but his eyes never left Beatrice, who walked beside them with surprisingly firm steps for someone who had almost drowned. "How are you feeling?" Richard asked when they were finally in the jeep, with the heater turned up to maximum. "Reborn," Beatrice replied with a smile. "And you?" Richard reflected for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. "As if I had woken from a long sleep," he finally replied. On the way back to the mansion, as Anthony cautiously drove along the muddy road, Richard shared a decision he had made in that extreme moment, in the dark waters of the lake. "When I thought I might lose you," he said in a choked voice, I realized you had become more important to me than anyone else in this world, Beatrice. I can't explain how it happened so quickly, but I feel as if I had always been waiting for you." The girl squeezed his hand affectionately. "Our spirits recognized each other, Uncle Richard. In another life, we were connected by deep bonds that transcend blood." "I don't know if I believe in past lives," the businessman admitted, "but I know what I feel now. And I promise that from today onwards, nothing and no one will threaten you again. You are under my protection, not as a legal guardian, but as—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Like a father," Beatrice completed softly. Tears welled up in Richard's eyes, and he nodded in silence. When they finally arrived at the mansion, they were greeted by a terrified Jonas, who was waiting for them at the main entrance. "Mr. Richard, thank goodness. Mr. Augustus is asking for you. He woke up an hour ago and is very agitated." Richard and Beatrice exchanged worried glances. "Take us to him immediately," the businessman ordered. They found the patriarch sitting in his bed, energetically arguing with his private doctor. Seeing them enter, Richard in his chair, soaked and covered in mud, and Beatrice equally wet and disheveled, Augustus interrupted himself mid-sentence. "What happened to you?" he asked, his eyes wide. "A long story, Father," Richard replied. "How are you feeling?" "Like an old fool who allowed himself to be deceived," Augustus replied with bitterness. "Someone tried to poison me, and I strongly suspect it was your own siblings." Richard showed no surprise. "Beatrice had already warned me about this. She felt the negative energy in your tea." The patriarch studied his granddaughter's serene face. "You truly possess special gifts, don't you, child?" Beatrice approached the bed and took her grandfather's hands in hers. "We all possess them, Grandpa. Some have simply disconnected from that perception due to materialism and ambition." Augustus sighed deeply. "I spent my life building an empire based on values that, I now realize, created more division than unity in our family. My own children tried to incapacitate me to take control, just as they did with Richard years ago." The businessman's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "I always suspected," Augustus admitted, "but I refused to see the truth. It was easier to believe in an accident than to accept that my own children would be capable of such cruelty." He squeezed Beatrice's hands. "Your arrival was an awakening, little one, a painful but necessary awakening." That night, as the storm finally abated over Lake Placid, New York, a new order began to establish itself in the Ashworth mansion. Richard, after a warm bath and medical attention to ensure he hadn't suffered hypothermia, met with Beatrice in the small office adjacent to his quarters. The girl had prepared an herbal infusion, whose aroma filled the room with notes of lavender and chamomile. "To restore your energies after today's ordeal," she explained, serving a cup to her uncle. Richard accepted the drink, observing his niece with renewed admiration. "What will happen now, Beatrice?" "Clara and Albert certainly won't give up easily." The girl smiled with serenity. "Now we will truly begin our journey, Uncle. The incident at the lake was just a prelude to the real challenge that awaits us." "And what would that challenge be?" "To heal not only you, but the entire Ashworth family. To transform decades of resentment and ambition into harmony and elevated purpose." Richard laughed softly, taking a sip of the infusion. "You are ambitious, little one." "It's not ambition, it's destiny," Beatrice replied, her eyes shining with ancient wisdom. "And speaking of destiny, did you know that Grandpa Augustus will soon announce a special event? A traditional challenge to decide the future of family leadership." Richard raised his eyebrows, surprised. "How do you know that? Did he mention anything?" "She didn't need to," the girl replied with an enigmatic smile. "I saw it in the lake's waters when I was submerged. Sometimes the greatest darkness reveals the brightest lights." The businessman shook his head, between amused and amazed. "You continue to surprise me, Beatrice, and I don't know if I'll ever get used to your predictions." "You don't need to get used to it," she replied, affectionately touching her uncle's hand. "Just trust, as you trusted today when you threw yourself into those dark waters to save me." Richard's eyes welled up at the memory. "I didn't think twice. When I saw you fall, something inside me had awakened, a strength I didn't know I still possessed." "It was your warrior spirit, dormant for years of bitterness," Beatrice explained. "And now that it has awakened, nothing can stop it again." As if to confirm her words, Richard again felt that strange tingling in his legs. more intense this time. For a brief instant, he believed he perceived his right big toe move slightly. Was it imagination, or the beginning of something miraculous? "Rest now, Uncle Richard," Beatrice said, getting up to leave. "Tomorrow we will begin the true healing rituals. Today you proved that you are worthy of them." When the door closed behind the girl, Richard remained for a long time contemplating the empty cup in his hands. For the first time in many years, he felt something he had forgotten how to feel: hope. News spread through the Ashworth mansion like wildfire. Patriarch Augustus had called an extraordinary family meeting for the following Sunday. The reason had not been revealed, but rumors abounded in the corridors. In Richard's quarters, a different atmosphere prevailed. In the 5 days following the incident at the lake, Beatrice had dedicated herself intensely to the healing rituals for him.